In occupied Berdyansk, the traitor and war criminal Mikhail Grytsay has been eliminated. This was reported to us by the main intelligence directorate, Khur. He was originally from the Poltava region, lived in Berdyansk, and headed the local branch of the Socialist Ukraine Party. Such an activist immediately sided with the occupiers, became very active, and as a result was appointed acting mayor and also became the deputy for housing and utilities infrastructure. Well, in short, he really let himself gather. You have it, that's his 30 pieces of silver. He was also involved in war crimes. He terrorized the local population. I think the locals know very well who he is, that he got what he deserved and that he handed over pro-Ukrainian citizens to the occupiers. Naturally, he also took part in organizing torture chambers in Berdyansk. So someone found him and made him a little less alive. By the way, on the GUR Telegram channel, there's an excellent reminder for people like Grytsay, Aksionov, Konstantinov, all the Saldos and the rest. I quote the GUR of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, which reminds, "For every war crime committed against the Ukrainian people, there will be just retribution." Well, what can I say? The personal bodyguard and driver didn't protect General Kirillov, although you remember him right in the very heart, right in the capital of the Russian Federation. You might be able to get away from grandma, from grandpa, from the wolf, from the fox, but you can't get away from the GUR and the SBU. Traitors like Kiva and many others can confirm that, or rather by now probably can't really confirm it anymore. In fact, I looked at the lists in a chronological order of who received just punishment. There are so-called LNR ministers occupying deputies, Kiva, as you know, war criminals like General Kirillov, Russian pilots who launched missiles at Ukraine. In short, they will find everyone and everyone will get what they deserve, especially those who, following orders, are directly destroying the free Ukrainian people. But the one who most of all deserves a ticket to the concert, you know who I mean. He commented on the strike on residential buildings in Kyiv. Let me remind you, an entire apartment entrance collapsed. The rubble was only cleared this morning. 23 people died. And a correspondent from the Associated Press asked Putin a question about the missile strike on Kyiv. Watch this video.
If your journalists had seen how entire residential neighborhoods were destroyed by our missiles, they probably wouldn't be able to tell you anything about it. They wouldn't have survived. If they saw anything at all, it was only from a distance. And the strike was not on residential neighborhoods, but on facilities of the defense industry complex, on factories that produce military equipment.
Completely out of his mind, Nemtsov was right, just a rather dim KGB guy. He also, keeps glancing around. Now, that was a funny joke. Your journalists wouldn't have been there if we had struck residential neighborhoods, and he looks around to see which of his usual court lackeys will laugh at his joke. To bring to power Putin a lackey, a bag carrier, this cowardly, deceitful, deeply insecure psychopath in the hope that he would be controllable, that he wouldn't later devour his own masters, was a very, very reckless idea. It was precisely his wretchedness, malice, and vindictiveness that later destroyed those who had led him by the hand into power. Although, on the other hand, it was inevitable that he would eventually govern the country to the point where it would become like an overheated boiler, completely destabilized with no way back. In other words, the fastenings are already starting to shoot out like bullets. And this empty-eyed corpse, he actually started to believe in himself, switched on God mode, and probably he truly believes that he will be included, inscribed in all the history textbooks as the great conqueror and the one who lifted all of Russia from its knees. Well, when Kabayev tries to pass off a destroyed house, a collapsed apartment entrance as some kind of Bayraktar or Sapsan factory or some other military facility, he's unintentionally admitting that he's not very good at hitting military targets. All that's left is terror. And terror is always a sign of weakness, not strength. By the way, friends, let me remind you that we have an important fundraiser for our soldiers from the 100 and Honest Brigade, who are the ones destroying all this filth that has come to our land. In other words, they're sending them underground, right where they belong. The fundraiser is for the Vampire unmanned aerial system. It's also called Baba Yaga, which drops a huge amount of blessed fire on the Russians at night. And the 100 and Honest Brigade is doing an excellent job of disposing of this orcish horde. Right now they are defending Chasiv Yar. This is currently one of the most difficult fronts. So let's help them get this hexacopter, this real airborne death for the Russians. They've been waiting for it for a long time and have reached out to me. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. There you'll also find the fundraiser card number and PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. Thank you so much. I always speak on behalf of myself and our warriors whom you are helping. You are simply the best. So if you have the opportunity, be sure to support this fundraiser. Well, Trump was asked whether the US would strike Iran's nuclear facilities. You know, I could probably answer for Trump by now. I mean, to know how he responds, if you throw balls with words into this drum and then a little parrot randomly pulls them out, you might get something similar. So Trump answered, will the US strike or not? I could do it, or I might not. Nobody knows what I'm going to do. Iran has reached out. I said it's already very late. Iran has a lot of problems. We'll see what happens. Nothing is over yet. I see. Well, Israel is considering the possibility of a special forces raid on Iran's Fordo nuclear facilities if they can't reach them with special American bombs. Let me remind you, what Iran has been good at all this time is exporting violence, exporting terrorism, digging deep into the mountains, building weapons, underground bases, underground cities, silos, and launchers. In short, that's what the Ayatollah regime has been doing. And one of the American officials said that indeed the Israelis told Trump that they might not be able to penetrate deep enough into the mountain with bombs, but they could do it with people. And since Israel effectively controls the airspace, such an operation no longer seems completely unrealistic. Well, as for the Israeli special forces, let me just remind you, they've already carried out a similar, though less large-scale operation. That was in September of last year, when they destroyed an underground missile factory in Syria by planting explosives there. They landed, set the charges, blew it up, and disappeared. So now, with Israel having full control of the airspace, it's possible that this operation might actually take place. But in the meantime, do you know what Trump is having doubts about? He's worried that while he can drop bombs, they might not damage the underground factory, and then he'd have to get drawn into a long-term war. Right now, they're studying whether it's possible to destroy these nuclear facilities in one strike and be done with it, because if that doesn't work, it could drag on for a long time. And Israeli officials are also worried that Iran will keep its nuclear program, and they're right to be concerned. Just look at North Korea, a poor, starving nation. But they're churning out weapons not just for themselves, they're even supplying them to Putin. From our perspective, from Ukraine's point of view, the weaker the links in this club of dictators, the better, because they're all tightly connected, constantly saving each other. Naturally, of course, the main savior is China, without which Putin would be missing out on about 130 billion every day. And I think he wouldn't even dare talk about war. 90% of Iranian oil is bought by China. And as for North Korea, it would have long since plunged into a food shortage if not for China. I think people in Israel also understand that if even the slightest chance is left for the nuclear program to be restored, the regime of religious fanatics will do everything possible to speed up the creation of that nuclear bomb. Believe me, Putin will help them with that, and in a hurry too, and not just Putin. Without a regime change, the threat will simply return. It's just a matter of time. Whether it takes months or years, the threat will come back. The same is true for the Russian Federation. Without fragmentation and a significant reduction in Russia's mobilization potential when Russia breaks up into several, or better yet, several dozen parts and ceases to pose a threat without this, the next war is just a matter of time, simply a matter of time. Moreover, Putin, having suffered defeat and been disgraced before the whole world in Ukraine, will want something that would be a real resounding victory. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be this Putin. It could very well be the person who now carries Putin's briefcase, just as Putin once carried Sobchak's. By the way, today Israel announced that it had struck Iran's nuclear facilities in Bushehr, Isfahan and Natanz. In other words, they're hitting hard over there, It turns out, by the way, that today I happen to come across something. I don't visit Elon Musk's social network X very often, but today I did, and somehow the network suggested Ayatollah Khomeini's account to me. He's quite active on Twitter, on the social network X. Obviously, it's not him personally, it's some kind of press office, but I think at the very least, the main points are probably approved by him. I decided to take a look at what the Ayatollah is posting on Twitter. The President of the United States is threatening us. With his absurd rhetoric, he demands that the Iranian people surrender to him. They should threaten those who are afraid of threats. The Iranian nation is not afraid of such threats. And the most interesting part is in the comments. Obviously, people have flooded him with all sorts of memes there. But one of the most popular comments is, not the people of Iran, not the Iranian nation, but you. As in, speak for yourself. In other words, don't associate yourself with the entire Iranian nation. And there are a lot of meme comments, pictures, of meetings with Khomeini. Khomeini is sitting there, and there are nameplates, head of the IRGC, head of the general staff, head of someone else, and nobody is there. And Khomeini asks, so where is everyone actually? That's it. Where is everyone? But here I started thinking about a bigger question. Has the rise of the clergy to power ever anywhere on the planet ended well? For the population, not for the clergy. So the rise of religious clergy to power has never ended well anywhere. They promise moral purification, but almost never actually lead to an improvement in quality of life. Take Iran, for example, it's all clear there. The Islamic Revolution, they overthrew the Shah, the Ayatollah came to power, and then everything started rolling from there. Let's be honest, the Shah was to blame himself. He got greedy and drowned in luxury. Now it's the clergy and the elite who are wallowing in luxury. So in reality, there's been economic decline, sanctions, and the emigration of tens of millions. Iran is a sponsor of proxy terrorism, and that's how it all ended up. The country simply turned into a republic of imams with nuclear ambitions. Afghanistan, there too, the clergy came to power, and not just once, but twice. Well, I think everyone understands what the Taliban's rise to power means. Closures women aren't even considered people. They have no rights at all. Public executions, bans on music, dancing, sports. The economy is in collapse, international isolation. They came well done, as they say, zero. They even get grain as humanitarian aid from infidels. That's how it is. Sudan from 1989 to 2019 was under the regime of Omar al-Bashir. Well, basically, it's all clear there too. He came to power and imposed a strict Sharia system. As a result, decline of infrastructure, the country torn apart. South Sudan seceded. He was overthrown in 2019. And the country is still in ruins. Wonderful. Pakistan, the same story. Myanmar, Buddhist religious nationalism. Wonderful. They came to power. Now, The Hague is investigating genocide. The country is internationally isolated, in the hands of the military. The economy is destroyed, and fanatic monks continue to incite violence. Super Somalia. It's the same thing here. Well, here it's chronic hunger, poverty, and terrorism, which is basically their export. Until recently, all they did was piracy. In general, Somalia is a textbook example of the failure of religious fanaticism. There's also Haiti, and there's also Nigeria. So, in short, nothing good has ever come of this. Clergy in politics always promise moral rebirth, but end up worse than the most corrupt secular regimes. So, that's how it is. By the way, the Russian Federation has a special fondness for such regimes. They have close cooperation with Myanmar, the Taliban, Sudan, and Iran. That's it. In other words, you can see that the greater the fanaticism and degradation, the more eagerly the Kremlin becomes a friend, especially if there are resources and, most importantly, an opportunity to destabilize neighbors. That's why Putin says we need to send waves of refugees. Let's start a war in Sudan or somewhere else. Then we'll give Europe a hard time. So this connection is already obvious to everyone. It's simply about resources. Everyone understands that. Putin himself is like that. It's easier for him to deal with people like that. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. And let's move on. Now, in Iran, there is a very, very strong and powerful protest potential right now. In other words, their social base for protest is already in place. And what's more, this protest doesn't have any single specific leader, so you can't just suppress it by grabbing the leader. It's like a horizontal sea, if you will. It's already spread out, so all that's needed there is just a spark. I think that when that girl was beaten to death for not being dressed the way they wanted, and then the woman life freedom protest broke out, that was incredibly powerful in my opinion. Right now they would just sweep away those religious fanatics. And that would settle the issue. Why is this important? Because dismantling regimes that are friendly to Putin from his club, from the axis of evil, dismantling these regimes means weakening Putin either indirectly or directly. That's why in Iran there is this persistent underground sea of protest. Of course, it won't immediately sweep away this dam of fanatics just like that, but it keeps eroding it every single day. That's why I think that maybe something serious will happen soon. And here the European Commission is sending a big hello to Orbán and Fico with its decision. In short, the tap of Russian gas is being tightened. What decision is that? So new contracts are banned on any import of pipeline gas and liquefied natural gas from Russia starting January 1, 2026. For short-term contracts, up to 12 months old existing contracts must be terminated. For long-term contract supplies under all remaining contracts will be stopped due to force majeure. And later this will be extended to oil and coal as well. So what do you think about that, Orbán and Fico? Russia is losing, I've added it up, somewhere between 30 and 32 billion euros a year. All in all, that's quite a substantial amount. So what does Orbán say? We must prevent this at any cost, otherwise the pipeline will turn into useless scrap metal. Of course it will, and you'll turn into useless scrap metal along with it. And that's putting it very, very mildly. Because Orbán has a loan from Rosatom for the PAX-2 nuclear power plant, and so does Fico. Fico says, we'll block the sanctions if they affect our nuclear power plants, and we'll block the supply of these evil fuel rods too. I don't think you will. And then there's Austria. This is what you call trying to sit on 16 chairs with one backside. The vice-chancellor called for keeping the door open for gas from the Russian Federation. Keep the door ajar. How clever. So what are Orbán and Fico supposed to do? Where? But what's the problem there? Russia allows and encourages shadow schemes. You can make crazy money on these contracts. That's exactly what non-transparent regimes do. What do they get in trouble for later? For trying to take over the judiciary, to clear out the information space, to kick the media out of the country, and so on and so forth. That's exactly what Orbán got in trouble for. And the regime needs to be fueled with money. And you can get that money from gray and shady schemes involving Russian energy resources. If there are no contracts, where will the money come from? I ask in the voice of Orbán and Fico. So by 2028, if all this is carried out, Russia will finally turn from being Europe's energy monopolist. Well, do you remember what Russia was before the full-scale invasion? They sold everything to everyone and everyone was happy. Nord Streams were being built, everything was great. But no, Kabaev decided he wanted to go to war. And now it's turning into an ordinary raw material supplier for Asia, and with a huge price discount at that. Just gigantic. So the loss of a market that took half a century to build, plus it will accelerate the structural budget deficit, that's inevitable. And of course, the Kremlin's political weight in all EU capitals has long since diminished. So Orbán, Fico and Austria might be able to freeze some minor details here and there, but the tectonic shift itself, when European energy finally breaks away from Russia, they won't be able to stop it. And now, as always, we have Donald Trump dragging his feet on sanctions. The US Senate has postponed sanctions against Russia at least until July. The reason is the escalation of the war between Israel and Iran, as well as new tax initiatives from the Republicans. These are the official reasons that some Republicans are voicing. According to Senator John Thune, the Senate is open to changes, but is waiting for a signal from the Trump administration. There is absolutely no reason to postpone the sanctions, to delay or push them back any further. There is only one reason: the fear and the desire to get a deal from Putin. That's all. By fear, I mean the fear that relations will deteriorate with that scum I showed at the beginning, the one who claims they're only hitting military targets. Shame, shame. You have a whip. You can lash that bold scum even while sitting in the United States. Your whip is long enough for that. No. In general, Trump himself has not yet approved the bill, focusing instead on domestic policy and the potential military conflict with Iran. But we all understand perfectly well that he could do it at any moment. But I read it to you, right? I'll do it. Or maybe I won't do it. I'll think about it. Or maybe I won't think about it. Or maybe I'll just go play golf instead. Everyone just bailed. Well, Ukraine is showing that even with reductions and even without help from our allies across the ocean, Ukraine is capable of holding back this vampiric tide that has surged upon us